My name is Robin Solonenko, and I'm your Access 365 database instructor. And this is a video from my Access Intermediate course. At the end of the day, we want your users to have a great experience when using your database forms. And one way we do that is to have things auto-populate for them or use what's on their screen to generate a query. In this short video, I'll show you how to pass values between a form and a query, so when the user returns to a particular form, a field is already filled in for them based on where they were on the previous form. Don't forget to check out the entire Access Intermediate course on my site, and we'll see you on the other side. Welcome back, everybody, to this section where we now get to pass values between forms and queries. And this actually is where it gets kind of fun and exciting because remember earlier I mentioned that when you have a query, you can't create a query for every possible scenario. And second, you can't expect your users to type what they want every time either. If the information can be pulled from a form, even better. And that's what we're about to do here. So to give you an example of what we're going to try and do, and then we'll build it. If you open up form cars, wouldn't it be nice if I had a button here that I clicked and it will go pull all the service orders for that Camaro to see, if it's been in the shop. Maybe I don't even want to assign it. But right now, I would have to create a query for this or go filter for car 100 and find it that way. So let's see how we can get this to work. So what we have to do first is we have to create the query. So go ahead and go to your Create tab up here. And with this time we'll do query design. And we're going to base it on table, what do we want here? Let's choose table service orders and table mechanics. Oops, service orders and mechanics. Remember, there's a relationship between those two, so it should pop up automatically. All right, so what do I want from service orders? I want the invoice number, car ID, and let's take make and model. And from the mechanics, I want to know basically who worked on it. So I'll take the first name and last name of the mechanic, and let's take the in-service date. Now, the in-service date is back on service orders. Okay, I don't want two of them, just want one. Okay, now you notice I went, I took a couple from service orders, a couple from mechanics, and then back to service orders. It doesn't matter the order here, but basically what we're saying is when we run this report, I want to see that information based on the cars. So if we just go ahead and view this, see what we get as a result, you can see it's basically pulling in all the service orders for all cars, and that's okay at this point. So let's save this, and we're going to call it QRY, cars in for service. Click OK. Name already exists. Do I already have that? Just hold on. Cars. Oh, I guess I do. I must be. Let me just see this in design view. Oh, it's the one I used from last course, so we'll just leave that one alone. I'll save it again. I'll cars in for service without the QRY in front because the other one has a different criteria on it. Hit OK. Okay, so there it is, where it is cars in for service. Okay, we'll close it out. Now let's open that from this car form here. And by the way, you will notice when actually I want to stop and do or fix something here. You notice when we open up our forms, up on top here it says FRM, officer, cars, etc. If you, it's time to get rid of that or clean that up. When you're in design view of your forms, turn on your property sheet and remember it's the form property. So form, there's the caption, there's where it says FRML, I guess I typed it wrong. So I can just say cars or cars form, it's up to you. And I'll just change that. So now when I flip it over, it says cars up there, not the name. That's the default behavior. Those forms will take the default name over here and put it up on top. So that's how you get rid of that. Okay, sorry to digress on that, But come back to your car form in design view. And now let's create a button that opens up that query. So you know how to do this by now. Go to your button in the controls. I'm going to put it right down here. But this time, you have to go to the miscellaneous category, and you want to choose Action Run Query. Next, and now what query do you want? It should be the cars in for service. Second one down. Next. And again, you can put a picture or text. We'll put a text here. So we'll just say check for service orders. Maybe a little bit longer button, that's okay. Next. We're not going to give that a name. Finish it, and there it is. And again, I'm going to do my formatting on that, make it bold and darker font. Okay, so now save this, switch to form view. So let's see what happens. So I'm sitting on the Camaro, I click check for service orders, but you see it just opens and executes the query, which is just show me all those items. So that was to be expected. We didn't tell it we only want car 100. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we could turn it into a parameter query, but that kind of defeats the purpose. The user again has to type 100 or 200. We don't want them to type that. So let's see what we can do. Back in design of the query now, we need to put a criteria row on this. Okay, in the criteria row for car ID, question is, what's the criteria? Well, this is the one you're may want to zoom in. So remember your function F2 to zoom in. This is for the criteria row for the car ID. What we need to do is we need to tell it where that car 100 number sits. Well, using square brackets, it sits on the forms object. So forms, square bracket. And then the symbol between objects is the exclamation mark. So you choose exclamation mark. And then, well, what is the form name? Well, we called it FRM, cars. So it's whatever you called that form, square bracket. Exclamation mark, what's the object called? Well, it should be called car ID. So I didn't check, so I'm taking a guess here. But now because there's a space, this is what I was referring to before, you definitely need to have your square brackets on this because there's a car space ID. So we're telling it is when you execute, in the background there should be an object called, which is a form. It's called form cars. On there is an object called car ID. I'm going to hit OK to that. But before we actually test this, I'm going to come back over here, switch this to design view, click on the assigned, and actually no, I called it assign number. So you see I would have had an error there. So I'm going to switch this here, this name of this assign number to car ID for this to work. Save it, flip it back to form view, and I'm going to go back to this query. I'm going to close and save the query. So now based on the car form, what should happen, if I hit that button, it should pull up this 100 and then go execute and pull back only the records for 100. Hit check for service orders. There it is. There's my 100. So it's working. I close it out. Let's go to the next one. Maybe I'll go to the Ford Fusion, which is 300. Check for service orders. Voila. There you have it. There's the two service orders and the mechanic that worked on them and the last in-service date. So it's working. Okay, it is a query, but I didn't have to type anything in. I just hit that button, boom, I can see it. And it's a query, so the query defaults to showing into a data sheet. If you didn't want this data sheet, you'd have to base a form on that query in order for that to work and then open up the form. But that's beyond the scope of the course today. Today was just about showing you how we can have a query pull information from an existing form and then execute. But that's not it. What else do we have to do? We have to go in the other direction. So the example there, if I'm going to close this out, open up form officers, and the search cars here, the idea here is, before we hit that, if I'm entering a new officer, which we'll do in a minute, I hit search cars. I want to go find a car for the officer, maybe this Ford F-150 here, this Raptor, and I want to assign it. So the idea here is when I click the stop button or the close button, it takes the 400 and pushes it back to the car ID for me. So we're going in reverse. So how do we do that one? Well, here's how we do that. And before we do that, we have to make sure we have these named, or we know what these names are. So go into design view of this pop-up screen, activate the assigned value here, and we can see it is assigned number. And that's okay as long as we know what that is, right? And go back to form officer and go to its design view, and that car ID is car ID. Okay, so we need to know those names because we're going to write a little bit of VBA code here in a minute. So we just wanted to check that. So the officer one is car ID, the car pop-up is on the assigned number. All right, so now the question begs, what is the user going to click on here that's going to take this number and push it back to officer? Now you have a couple options. You could create another button here that the user would click that says something like, update car ID to officer. So when they click the button, it pushes it back. But then they also have to click the stop button. And so it all depends on how you want this to work, because at this point, every time they open up this car pop-up and every time they hit the stop button, it will push that value over. So you kind of have to, the safest one probably is to create a button here for it that's separate, but just to save some time, we all know how to create buttons. Let's just assign it to the stop button. So when they close the form, it'll push the value over. Now the next question is, okay, so it's going to be that button, and we go to the event over here, and it's going to be, well, what is going to happen? Well, we don't have a proper event here that we can use. So therefore, I need to go to an event in the form. So remember how to get to the form up here in the corner, or choose form from the drop down here, because this is the one that has all the events that we actually need. And the one that we're looking for here is on unload. So that would be this one right here. On unload, so basically when it puts it away, we can do an action. Well, go ahead, click on the ... here, and again, choose a code builder, and we will go into the VBA code. And we were in here earlier, and take a look, that's that whole license one sitting in there as well. So in between here, we have a private sub where it says on the form, unload event, do the following. Well, what do we want to do? So I'm going to tab in there, and basically we're going to, again, we have to use square brackets. So the forms object, exclamation mark, the name of the form of the officer form, which was, in square brackets, FRM underscore officer, square bracket, exclamation mark, and that there was called car ID. Car ID. Well, what about it? Well, you're assigning it. So you're saying that a field, the car ID on the form officer, is going to equal the forms object, exclamation mark, square bracket, the car pop-up form, exclamation mark, and its field assigned number, square bracket. Okay, so on unload, when this form closes, there's currently a form that's open, and it's called form officer. That field car ID is now going to equal this form, this car pop-up, and this specific field. Right, let's see if this works. I close that out. I'm going to save that, close it out. Okay, so now we're sitting on officers. We hit the new record. I click the search cars button. We navigate to the Ford Raptor here. It's a car 400. So what should happen when I hit that close button here, it should take 400 and push it back to that car ID, hit close, and voila, there's car ID. So now I can finish this and say maybe it's badge 7. Maybe I'll put my name in here and I'll choose a rank, gender, email. Done that, and the rest I'll leave empty because I don't think I have required on those. And sure enough, I can go to the next record. So there you go. I now have car 400 assigned to my name. If I open up table officer, there's car 400 and Robin, I'm officer number 7. Okay, that easy to push that value back. And that, ladies and gents, is between those two is how you can pull information from a form, throw it into a query, or take it from another form and throw it back. And I did, as a user, I didn't have to bother typing that 400. Okay. Now the next point to this, and it's covered in the next course, is because I did that, I really should take away the edit capabilities of this. We shouldn't allow users to type in here by accident because it's forced in through the query. That's the next logical step. All right, that's all we have to say for passing values between forms and queries. We'll see you in the next one where we look at counting records. See you on the other side.